Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about unit testing database objects. Now, of course, this is completely different from unit testing your applications, right? Because you're going to concentrate solely on database objects, so you're going to try to find bugs before they even get to the application, right? Now, this does a couple things for you. Number one, you put together these test scenarios and it allows you to find bugs before they leave your desk, right? Or before they leave your initial dev phase. So you're gonna write different tests and you're gonna see in these different scenarios if your objects perform the way you want them to. But more importantly, they also show you how things are going to perform as things change over time. So if you make a change to an SP or to a function, these tests are going to run, and then you're going to be able to see if anything you did broke anything, right? And of course, as time goes on, you're going to add more and more test cases. So let's say that you push an object into prod and you come across a bug. Well, then you can add a test for that bug and you won't get caught by it again, at least, right? Or maybe you'll add 2 more tests because it's, that bug makes you think of something else that might go wrong. So anyway, let's go ahead and set up database unit testing from scratch. Here I'm in Visual Studio 2017 and of course SSDT, right? So let's go ahead and create a project. We're going to start here with new project. And we're going to go with other languages and SQL, and right here, SQL database project. Let's call this unit test vid. There we go. We're going to create a directory, but not a Git repository for it. Just takes a few seconds here. There we go. And now we have our blank database project. Now, there are a number of ways you can populate this project, right? You can just create the objects inside of there. So I can come in here and say add, and I've got tables and SPs and functions and stuff I can add in here, right? Or I can add it from a script. Or, like what we're going to do, you can import from a database. Now, you can do it from DACPack or from a SQL script as well, but we're going to do it from a database. Now, I've already got my database here. I'm going to use my Minion database. This is the one I use to write all of the Minion maintenance products. And I'm going to say start. There we go. That's going to take a few seconds, so I'm going to pause and come back when it's done. And there you go. It literally went the second I paused. There we go. Now we've got all of our objects here. SPs, functions, whatnot, right? Excellent. So, we should be able to come in here. Let me expand that again. I didn't mean to. Oh, there we go. I should be able to come in here and right-click and create a test. But I can't. So there's something here that's keeping me from being able to create a test. Well, number one, I need a test project. Number two, what I really need, or what I really encourage you to do, is to come in here to Tools and Extensions and Updates and install the in-unit test generator extension right here. That's going to give you the ability to easily create tests. Now, I'm also using ReSharper from JetBrains. But that really doesn't matter. That just makes things a little bit more graphical and a little bit easier to manage, but you can get by just fine without it, and the process doesn't really change. So, I've got in-unit installed, and now I need to go create a test project. So I'm going to right-click over here on the solution, and I'm going to add a new project. And in this case, I can't be SQL. It's got to be a C#, if I can find it. There it is. So a C# project. And I'm going to go to Test. And I'm going to say Unit Test right here. There we go. And let's go ahead and call this vid tests. And see if I get any love that way. And the target framework should be as high as you can, at least 4 dot something, I think, I forget. There we go. Again, a few seconds to create that. Perfect. Let me close this down because I don't really care about that. Now, I've got my new project. I've got a database project in here, and I've got a test project in here. So I should, now that I've got my test project, I should be able to come back here and create a test. Well, I don't see anything for creating a test in here yet. There's a couple more things that we need to do first. First, we need to add some references in here so that we can get all of our database testing objects. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to right-click on references, and I'm going to say Add Reference. Now here I've got this in my recents. I'm going to expand this a little bit. And I don't remember if you have to add all of these objects or just some of them, but I go ahead and add all of them anyway because they're in my recent. So definitely Tools, Components, and Test Conditions. Actually, sorry, Test Conditions is one of my custom ones. We'll talk about that in a later video. But I'm going to get this and this, and Model Composition, and Test Tools UI, and Schema, and Testing Adapter, and Test Framework, and those are the last ones. These last two are my custom conditions. So we're going to get all of those, and here is the path to those, because they probably won't be in your GAC. So there you go. There's the path to each one of those, and you would just come up here and you would just go to Browse down here and browse to that folder and click on each one of these DLLs and import them. So now that we do that, I've got OK. There we go. Now I should be able to create a test, right? Here I still don't have anything in here that allows me to create a test. And here's something that a lot of people won't tell you, or that the documentation won't tell you anyway, as far as I can tell, that the project has to be able to build. Now, why wouldn't the project be able to build? There are a number of reasons. Syntax errors, missing objects, all of that, right? So let's go ahead and go to Build, and let's say Build Solution, and let's see what we've got. I've got 26 warnings. You can live with warnings, but I've also got 177 errors in here. Goodness. So a lot of this stuff right here is like MR reindex DB has unresolved reference. Okay, well, I'm not using that SP anymore, so I can get it out of the project. But what happened was I've renamed the table columns in there from reindex group order to just group order, and then reindex order to group DB order or something like that, right? So I've renamed these columns, and that's why this SP doesn't work anymore. So I'm just going to get rid of it, and then I'm going to get rid of all of the other objects that are causing problems, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've dropped all of those objects that were causing me problems, and I'm down to 2 errors, and these are where the test class attribute exists in 2 of my references. So I've got 2 references with the same test attribute class in there. So I've got, the first one is Quality Tools Unit Test Framework, and the other one is Test Platform Test Framework. I'm going to get rid of the Quality Tools and see what happens there. So I'm going to say this guy right here. I'm going to right click and I'll remove it as a reference. And now let's build again and see what happens. There we go. We got 0 errors this time. We still have 201 warnings. A lot of this is missing it's missing a reference, right? It's got an unresolved reference because some of these things go out to like master and MSDB, and you would have to import those databases in here as well. And so the warnings you can do without, it doesn't matter. In fact, I'll show you how to get rid of those warnings at the end of the video, I hope. Remind me and I'll talk about it. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. Now, if I come here to SPs and say backup DB, when I right click, now I have create unit tests. So it really matters that you're able to build the project successfully. Now let's look at one more thing that can keep the project from being built successfully. If I come here and change this to alter, there we go. I'll save that and then I'll hit build. The project won't build. There we are, and you see I get this, and it says it's not this statement isn't recognized in this context. So when I double click on that, it takes me to that, right? So I have to change that back to create. There we go, save that, and now I'll build again. There we go, and everything's just fine. Now, even if you've got unit tests already in here, you won't be able to run them. There won't be a way to run them. It'll disappear if you can't build the project. So even if you're testing something that builds itself, right? So if I'm trying to test backup DB and this other one, say check DB right here, is the one that doesn't build, you still can't test anything in the project unless the entire project builds first. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and build a test. All right, so let's see what we're going to do. You know what? Let's run backup statement get. This is the procedure in Minion Backup that actually produces the backup statements. So I'm going to right click on here and I'll say create unit test. There we go. And now it's going to ask you whether you want this to be as a new class or insert the unit test into a different test. Since we don't have any other tests yet, let's go ahead and do it here. Now, I like to name these after the SPs or the objects that they're testing. You can do whatever you like. So, but I'm going to call this backup statement get. Tell it okay. Oh, you know what? Yeah, look, it wants the quality framework tools now, doesn't it? Select the connection for the test. So this is the database connection that you're going to use to perform the test. I'll double click on that. Right, so I'm missing that unit test object, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that back in there. So I'm going to right click on here and add reference, and I'm going to go back in here to this. Which one was it? Here it was, this quality tools. There we go. I'm going to put that back in there. Use this script to test the database. This script is required for every SQL Server unit test. Absolutely. So we're going to click to create this. There we go. And now we've got test 1 inside of here. And if you look in here, we've got a number of tests. Let me go ahead and close this down real quick. There we go. So we've got a number of tests. You've got data checksum and empty result set and execution time and expected schema. And this result set column contains value. That's one of mine. And we've got row count and we've got scalar value. So let's go ahead and do something really simple and let's say row count. So I'm going to add a row count test and I'm going to get rid of this inconclusive thing because we don't care about that. Now I need to also call the SP itself, right? So one thing, but before we do that, one thing I'll show you is that you can also do pre-test and post-test. So you can run pre-test SQL and post-test SQL. And that's the cool thing about these database unit tests is it creates C# classes behind the scenes, but you're working in nothing but T-SQL. So you get to write your tests in T-SQL and then have the testing engine do all of the heavy lifting for you, right? So I'm going to leave this here. I'm not going to have a pre-test, but what I would do here, or what I do here, is I use this pretest to set up any conditions in the database that I need. So if I need to add rows to a table, or add a different object or something like that, then I set up my test scenario there, and then I break it back down in my post test. So okay, here I'm gonna say, I thought I was gonna say, there we go, exec minion dot, what did I say we were testing? Oh, stop it. Get that back. Oh, backup statement get, that's right. Okay. I said close. There we go. Here. There we go. And I don't remember what the parameters are to this, so we're going to look at the SQL Object Explorer. There we go. And I'm going to take this project. I think I can see it from here. Store procedures. And I've got backup statement get right there. If I expand that, oh well, fine. So it takes database name, backup type, and DB size. I can do that. So DB name, I'm just going to go minion dev. There we go. Backup type will say full. And size, we're going to look at 20. There we go. And that's all I need to do to create this test. Now I just Control S to save. And officially, I can go run this now. So I can look at my Test Explorer here. And I've got to build my solution first. Let's see if it'll build. Remember we had that error down there for the thing. Let's go ahead and see if it'll build. If not, then we'll take care of that. So we'll build the solution. And no, the build failed. So you know what? We're going to look at getting rid of this other one instead. What did we do last time? We did the quality. So let's do the test platform test framework. Let's get rid of that. So we're going to get rid of that one this time and see if things build now. There we go, and we'll need to get rid of those extensions as well. That's this one right here. Let's get rid of that. And let's build again. There we go. And now we've got our tests right here. See, now that we've built it inside of our Test Explorer, let me expand this a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to get rid of this guy because I don't care about those. So I've got my Test Explorer, and you can see that here via View, and then Test Explorer should be in here somewhere. Let's see, test results, probably through test, and then test settings, Test Explorer. That's where it is right there. There we go. Okay. So now if I expand this here, I can see that I've got these, and I've got this unit test right here that was created with it. Let's go ahead and kill that thing. I don't want that anyway. That's that default test. So let's just delete it. And now let's rebuild the project to get rid of it. There we go. So now you can see I've only got one. And I've got SQL test 1 inside of here. There we go. And now let's just run this. Let's right click. We're going to say run selected tests. And it failed. Beautiful. Because I haven't given it any test conditions, I think. Let's go in here and let's say it's enabled. So once I go here, I just got to go to the properties pane. I can also right click and say properties. Right click and say properties. Ah, so I got a problem here with this SP. It expects another SP. that's having problems, and that may be why I don't have my test conditions. So let me go fix that and I'll come right back. Okay, I got that worked out. There was actually a problem in the SP itself. Now you see, even setting up the test can show you problems you have with some of your objects. So, as well, I had to, in order to get the properties here, I had to close this test and reopen it again. All right, now, so what am I looking at here? So this is the properties for this test condition right here. The test is enabled. The result set, I expect one result set, and how many rows do I expect? In this case, it says I expect 0, and we know that's not right, but you know what? I really don't know how many rows I am expecting. So let me copy that and run out here real quick and just run that really fast and see what I am expecting from this, because I honestly have no idea. I think that might be... There we go. So let me just do this. Well, then run it anyway. There we are. And I'm expecting 4 rows from this. So let's say I'm expecting 4 rows. There we go. So now I'll save the test, Control S, and let's run the test again. And it passes this time. Now, if I want to look at it, if I want to say I'm expecting 3 rows, the test should fail again. There we go. And down here, it'll tell you why. Let's see. Let me widen this a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. There we go. So it says here, it tells you that row condition 1 is what failed. And it said the 4 rows did not match the 3 expected rows. So I expected 3 rows and I got 4 rows. Well, that's pretty telling, isn't it? All right. So those are the basics of how to set up a test. Now let's go a little bit further and let's change this back to 4. There we go. And we can create any number of tests in here, right? So I can have this pre-test, I can have the pre and post test we've already talked about, so I can use that to set up my conditions that I want. And I can have a number of conditions in here. I can not only say, you know, that I want 4 rows to return, but I can also say that I want it to return within a certain time, or just that it has a not empty result set, and so on, right? So that it has a scalar value returned, right? This would be really good for certain SPs, but certainly for functions, right? So, okay. However, this backup statement get right here, it's got this one test, SQL test 1. I don't like that. That's not very descriptive, and when you get a lot of tests in here, you want them to be as descriptive as possible. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this name. I'm going to rename this test, and since it's a full with a 20, with a size 20, then I'm going to change this test to be full, and let's say -20. Let's do that. Then I just stop it then. Then I'm going to say full 20 instead. Full 20. Tell it OK. There we go. And that tells me what I'm looking for. There we are. Now it says full 20. Now let's say I want to test it at 10, right? Well, I can add a new test in here, or I can come in and I can add a new class to the current test. So in here, let's go ahead and add a test. And I want to call this test full 10. So I want to see what it's going to be like when it's 10. And you see I've got the same thing. I've got my properties here. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add row count to this. I'm going to get rid of this inconclusive thing. And I have no idea what it's going to be like at 10. So again, I have to come back here and give it a 10 and see what I'm looking for. I'm looking for 2. So now I'm going to say I want one result set and I want to return 2. There we go. I'm going to save this guy. It's already got a full 10 in here. So you can see that when I run this, I've got my backup statement get test, and I can see all of my conditions. Well, my 10 failed. What made my 10 fail? Who knows, right? Let's see. That it said it did not contain at least one result set. Okay, so it didn't. Oh, that's because I didn't add the thing to my test. So let's go over here to full test 20 and let's add the actual test code to it, shall we? Oops, that's wrong. I want to go here to full 10. There we go. And let's add the actual test code. And let's put 10 in here. So you see how this works, right? I got that. Now let's go back and run both our tests. There we go. Right there. And they both passed. All right. Now let's come in here to Solution Explorer and see what all this looks like. I'm going to refresh just to make sure. I'm going to close this down because I want to concentrate on the tests and close the references. There we go. So now I've got backup test here, backup statement get, and I've got these two guys up under here. So let's do another one and let's add it as a separate class. So I'm going to go back into here and I'm going to go into minion and backup statement get, wherever that is. There we go. And I'm going to right click, and I thought it was up here. I think if it's not up there, then it'll be down here to... Oh, you know what? That's what I did. Ha! I need to change this back to create. When I save that, and that's always the problem, right? Is you get stuck by stuff like that if you do your editing in here too. Now when I right click, there is my create unit test. And now I don't want to create it as a new class. I want to insert it into another test. And I want to make that backup statement get. So when I say OK, let's come and take a look at what this looks like. There we go. And now I've got this new test in here. So you see, it's the same thing as doing it in there. If I were to create it as a separate class, it would give me a completely separate test. I'll show you that in a second. So now we've got this third one in here. Here's our designer, and this is our new one. It's called minion underscore backup statement get test. It's got to name it something, right? So let's go ahead and rename it. And we'll rename it... log 30. So I want to test log backup statement creations this time. There we go. Now you can see it's added log 30 over here. And I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to go to log 30. I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. I could use that, but I don't need to. There we go. I'm going to change this to log. Change this to 30. And I have no idea how many rows I expect. Probably 1, but I'm not sure. And I'll replace that in there. And I'm going to run that SP and see how many rows I'm expecting for this. Oh, 4. Look at that. There you go. So now I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to show my properties. I'm going to come here to row count. I'm going to add my row count, get rid of the inconclusive one, come up here, change the row count to 4. There we go. And I'm going to run my test again. And they've all run now. Beautiful. So you can see for my backup statement again, I've got 3 different tests under there in that one test class. Now, if I were to create a different test class for this one, let's do that again. So we'll come here to SPs and backup statement get again. I keep losing it. There it is right there. Let's say create unit test. And now this time I want to create it as a new class. I'll call this statement get diff. There we go. And it's going to bring up the new test explorer, right? But look what it does down here. It gives it to me as a completely separate class, just like this one. So as where this one has different classes inside of it, or yeah, this one is its own class. So you really, I don't want to say you want to avoid this, but you want to get your structure worked out so that everything looks good inside of here. You want everything to look as good as possible inside of here, and so that it's really easy to find your tests in case you have problems or in case you want to expand them. And you can also put these things in folders. So in here, you can right-click and you can create a folder. Where's the add folder right there? And then you can just drag and drop them into different folders if you want to. All right. The problem with this type of testing, and now let's go ahead and get rid of this test because I don't really care about that. So I'm going to just delete it. There we go. And the problem with this type of testing, right, is that it's fairly static. In other words, let me bring up, do I have this test open? Nope. So let me bring up when I do this test, I've got a very limited number of conditions that I can test for in here by default. So I can test for row count or a scalar value or whatnot, but a lot of times there's quite a bit of interplay in these tests, right? Especially in my testing, what I need to do is I need to not only see, you know, a row count. I mean, this was a simple one, a row count, and this is certainly a valid test for this SP. But I also want to make sure that certain conditions exist, maybe in the result set or maybe even in other tables. So I want to see, you know, if I get 4 of these guys, if this other condition also exists or this other condition also exists. So database testing isn't necessarily as simple as, oh, is it an empty result set or did it take this long to run? And don't get me wrong, those are valid tests. They really are. But they're not very detailed and they're not going to hit very many business scenarios. So in your own solutions, right, you may have to make sure that you get, you know, not only, you know, 4 rows, but you may need to ensure that you get 10 columns and that this one column doesn't contain this specific value, right? I want to make sure that, you know, if this column contains this value, that, you know, if column 4 contains this value, that column 1 also contains this value, and if not, then I consider that a failure, right? So these are the types of things that you can't do with this type of testing by default. To do that, you have to write your own custom conditions like I did here. Now I'm going to cover custom conditions in a different video, and I'll link to it at the bottom, right? I'll put the link to it in at the bottom of the post, so you'll be able to get to it. But this is just how to get database testing up and running within a project and to start doing some basic testing. And I want to talk about one more thing here, and that's going to be live testing, because I think this is a really important part of your database testing as well. Okay, so live testing allows you to run these tests automatically as you build your objects. Now, one thing that you can do with something like ReSharper is you can have it set up your test to run every time you save an object. That may or may not be overkill, but as long as you get in the habit of building your solution every time you work with it, then you should be able to run your tests all the time, right? So let's go ahead. We'll come here, we'll right-click on the test, and we'll say live unit testing, and we'll say include it in live unit testing. There we go. And the first time you do it, I've already done it once. The first time you do it, it'll build it and include it into the live unit test. Now let's give that a shot. Let's go ahead and build our solution and see if the test runs. Build solution. There we go. All right. And we can come here to our test settings. So we can come here and say test, and you've got run, you've got live unit testing here. We'll look at the options. There we go. So we've got our options right here. And it says start live unit testing on solution load. I usually don't like to do that because, you know, I want to get up and running, right? I want to work when I fire up Visual Studio. I don't want to have to wait for 2 minutes to run 45 tests, right? So, and let's see. So you've got a maximum number of test processes here too. You can increase that up to 4, as it turns out. So you don't have to run them all serially. And let's take a look at the NuGet Package Manager. Probably not, no, there's nothing there I want. Okay, so we'll close this guy. Now I'm going to come over here and I'll make a change to this. I'll just do that and I'll change it, and then I'll build and you notice that it didn't run, right? So let's see if we can include this entire thing. So we'll say live unit testing, and we'll include it in live unit testing, and then we'll build again. Ah, there we go. Just took a second. So let's come here, and let's build the solution again. And it just did that. So I'm going to come here and save. Oops. Build. There we go. And you can see it doesn't always do it. I don't know if it has to have a substantive change. But let me come here and do something like, print me. And then let's build this guy. There we go. I think it did run. I think it just ran really fast. Let's go ahead and change one of these guys and make sure that we're getting what we want. So we'll come here and we'll change this to, see, it's supposed to be 2. I'll change it to 1. And then let's come here. And it's gonna run it anyway. I'm gonna save that. And let's build and see if we can get it to run again. Okay, so in my normal projects, I build these things once a day, and my tests run after that. I've got them set to run 1 at a time, but you know, I may change that to 2 at a time because I'm starting to get a lot of tests. But I have found a number of minor bugs just from setting up the tests and getting the tests themselves working. Now, in the next video, I'm going to show you how to create these custom conditions right here. And it's going to make your testing a lot more flexible. It's going to put most of the work inside of T-SQL because we're DBAs and that's where we're most comfortable. I'm sure a C# guy would bring all of the stuff into his class and do all the stuff in C#. but we're going to do everything in T-SQL, and you're going to see that it's going to make our testing engine itself a lot easier to configure and a lot more flexible as far as our testing goes, right? Now there's one more limitation in this testing, right? And that's that you don't have results. You have these immediate results here, but you can't save your results. So that's one thing that we're also going to be able to cure with our testing solution, is we're going to also be able to save the results and run these things from the database. We can build any application we want to and run our database tests from there and save all the results so we can see if any of them failed. So we don't even have to run them from Visual Studio anymore. We can just run these things as database jobs or call them from PowerShell or do whatever we want, and then have the results saved and look at the results later, or have it just send us an email if any of them fail. So there you go. That's the basics of testing database projects in SSDT. We had a couple bumps. You can see it's not the most beautiful test engine that there is. You don't get nice graphic results or anything. And you know, to me, I'm not even sure if the live testing always works. For me, I've had it work sometimes and not work other times. So, you know, catch as catch can there, but it's always really easy to come in here and right click and say run selected test, right? So you can even analyze your code coverage. So one thing, what that does is that looks at all of the code inside of your project and shows you how many objects don't have code coverage, right? So, or don't have test coverage. So ideally what you want to do is you want to be able to cover 100% of your project, so everything has at least one test. You can't always do that, but you can try. And so this is going to have relatively low test coverage because I have dozens of objects in there and I've got one object covered. But anyway, there you go. That is database project testing in Visual Studio.